Chapter 111. Gathering all my will into a fist, I got up from the floor, still feeling weak, but it is not surprising. I got out of the Chamber of Secrets under a complex of concealing charms and then made my way to the house's common room and then to my room. There were no guys in the room. Well, I don't really care where they are. I need to sleep, so I'll change right now, lie down, and think a little. Wait, I just blinked, and it's already morning. And the guys are already sleeping in the room. The day yesterday exhausted me thoroughly, it turns out. I got up, touched myself, listened, nothing critical. I sat back on the bed. I didn't have time to think yesterday. First, despite the unenviable situation of being bitten by a werewolf, I should continue my morning training. There were two reasons for that. I'd never broken my schedule before, except for oversleeping once. It would be stupid if it were not for the witnesses of daily jogging and other gymnastics. Disruption of the training schedule can raise questions. The second reason is that all of this is not a reason to give up on my workouts. The hour I'd saved up was hardly a big deal, and I was not going to neglect myself like Lupin. Nodding to myself, I got up, changed into my gym clothes, and went for a run. Already on the main tower's stairs, I met Professor Snape, whose mood did not even dispose to a greeting nod. Well, okay. The rest of the morning schedule passed without any excesses, and I did not notice any radical changes in myself, except for the scars. I felt them. I tidied up and, with undisguised sadness, looked at one of the sets of winter clothes, which had to be stowed in the bottom of my bag, threw it on my shoulder, and went to breakfast in the Great Hall. The teachers were almost fully present. Lupin seems to be running around the woods somewhere, having lost his mind, but he'll be back tomorrow. During the winter holidays, the Great Hall had only a teacher's table and one common table for those who stayed. It seems that I am generally the only one of the students who decided to attend breakfast. Good morning, I nodded to the professors as I took a seat at the table and received a symmetrical response. Breakfast immediately appeared in front of me, and I didn't wait long to start eating. It seems, Dumbledore spoke up. You, Mr. Knight, the only student who decided to join us for breakfast. Seems to be, I shrugged, chewing on my bacon. At least Ron and Harry are still asleep. Youth, the headmaster smiled. In that case, I'll tell you the good news. I wasn't the only one who stopped eating in anticipation. The professors also turned to the headmaster. According to verified information, Sirius Black will not be returning to Hogwarts, which means the Dementors will be gone soon. I have an appointment with the minister just after breakfast where we will discuss the matter. Well, thank Merlin. Flitwick clapped his hands. This will need to be celebrated with mead. Phileas, hissed McGonagall, hiding a smile. Not in front of the children. Oh, come on, Minerva, the little professor grinned. I don't think Mr. Knight has no idea about the different drinks. Who knows, Professor, I shrugged with a smile. Who knows, but either way, the news is really good. But what's the reason, Headmaster? Did they catch him? No, he's still out there. But like I said, according to verified information, he won't be trying to infiltrate Hogwarts again. He's probably come to his senses and gone to recover from Azkaban. So, in time, the threat will become even greater. Dumbledore nodded with feigned seriousness. He has reached his goal and will not return. But everyone said his goal was Potter's death. He was more than alive this morning and demonstrated it very vividly by competing with Weasley in snoring volume, and it's true, I'm just used to it. Fortunately, Sirius Black's purpose was different, and as it turns out, he didn't carry any danger. Okay. Anyway, the Dementors' imminent departure is wonderful news. After breakfast, I went straight to the library, as did Madame Pants. On the way, I decided to ask a few questions. Madame Pants, can you tell me if the library has any literature on werewolves? Detailed research. Lycanthropy, very rare material. How so? There has been practically no research. In the last century, Marlowe Forfang studied werewolf habits, and this is the only work describing werewolf life in both phases. As for body changes, the nature of the curse, etc., the data is sparse and scattered, no one really cared about it, and werewolves themselves were almost never in contact. It might be worth a look in the forbidden section, in the books about blood and maleficence, but I'm afraid that might be a waste of time. Thank you. Upon reaching the library, I headed straight to the forbidden section. I don't have the knowledge I need in my head, which means I should go through the section where Hermione worked. Exactly. Why didn't I think of that in the first place? I turned around and left the library, and went to the Olary. There, scribbled on a torn sheet of paper, a letter to the girl. I congratulated her and her parents on Christmas and asked, doesn't she know any books on maleficence or blood or magic medicine or anything else related to that? Seeing the first owl that came across, lured her and gave the letter. Take it to Hermione Granger, please. The owl hooted and flew away. The answer can be expected only tomorrow morning, at breakfast in the Great Hall, or I can come to the Olary in the evening, and if the owl returns, it will give the letter. Now I can go to the library. Chapter 112. When you seek information purposefully, time flies by. The penultimate day of vacation has come. I have a little more than 2 weeks left, and at the moment, I can summarize the following: I'm in a really bad situation. Hermione replied the same day, and I picked up the letter in the evening in the Olary. I received congratulations in return and a list of related books she had seen or read in the forbidden section and in the public domain. For practically the rest of the vacation, I did nothing but read, study, comprehend, eat, and occasionally sleep. I have shoveled through more than 30 books, folios, and scrolls of varying degrees of danger, from the basics of magic medicine to abstract concepts and visions on the living organism Vita Mysterium, the science of the mysteries of life, death, and non-life. I came across materials on so-called maleficism with its methods of curses and getting rid of them, 2 works on necromancy with its vision of the concept of the soul, and all sorts of other stuff. A lot of this knowledge is abstract, but a good background in biology and allied disciplines, both human and non-human, has allowed me to understand many things. But unfortunately not in lycanthropy, although in terms of knowledge, I am now equal to a good but completely inexperienced medi-wizard of average skill. Although I think there's a lot more to learn when you join a guild. No matter how much I've read and studied, I can't understand wizards' attitude towards this obvious and serious problem, which can bring any respectable wizard down to the very social bottom in a moment, if only the public is aware of the problem. Take, for example, the works on maleficence. The great insert name yourself will let you learn by reading this Talmud about all kinds of curses on both a person and an object or area, to understand the mechanisms of their work in the representation of wizards, and methods of struggle. Oh, yes, there's also lycanthropy. Lycanthropy prevention, throw avada at the werewolf. Or any other ways to interrupt its existence, though the chance that this werewolf will interrupt yours is a bit higher for the average wizard. However, in one folio of chimerology, a nameless wizard experimentalist suggests hiding the results of your labors under the guise of ordinary magical animals in a rather extravagant way. This wizard first created the chimera he wanted, then boiled it in a special potion. Alive. In the end, the potion was transformed, as I understand it, into a kind of colloidal suspension, separating into a remnant useful to the wizard and a useless base mass. The resulting useful mass was combined with the help of another potion with a jar of Central Asian magic mosquitoes, now completely exterminated because of a disease they spread, pestilence fever. A terrible disease that affects only certain magical mammals and magical primates. Yes, there are some, but not about that now. During the merger, a liquid substance of a poisonous green color was obtained. The intravenous injection of the substance slowly and surely transforms the experimental magical creature into the original chimera. However, its overall characteristics differ from the original by a third in the direction of weakening. But according to the wizard experimentalist, this is not the result that is needed because the original goal is to hide your development among ordinary magical animals. That's when he came up with the last stage of processing the green fluid substance. A complex ritual was performed over it, during which strict conditions were set to transform the animal into a chimera. The wizard experimentalist chose a complex mental impulse as the conditions for the animal to turn into a chimera at the wizard's will, but assured that the conditions could be anything from a banal fracture of the little finger of the animal's left paw to some environmental conditions. In the absence of conditions, the animal can calmly live its normal life and even die without ever transforming. At the same time, it is possible to fine-tune the conditions of transferring chimera essence to the animal's relatives or to block this function at all. Particular attention was paid to the fact that the animal must necessarily be magical. Without the magical essence, everything is useless, and an ordinary animal dies painfully. This green liquid lines up, as written, the essence of the chimera around the magical essence of the animal, and when the moment comes, it is through the magic of the animal that the chimera reveals itself to the world. Such material I considered a most genuine revelation. Even though the text of this folio was in the format of a description, without detailed instructions, it made me think, what if a werewolf is a chimera? Such an assumption has a place because it turns not into an ordinary wolf but into some kind of mutant. All the characteristics of the body are much higher than those of animals. Such information is capable of generating many different theories and assumptions, but all of them will remain assumptions without tests and experiments. But even here, not everything is smooth. Among the materials of magical medicine and other related disciplines that I studied, there are no spells or rituals for really deep scanning of the body, cells, and other things. Even though ancient wizards had their own notion of bacteria and viruses as tiny organisms, they did not seek to study them, body cells, and their structure. Why go far? The ritual performed by Malfoy over me, and I found a similar one. It's pretty simple, considering what it does. With its help, the wizard does not delve into genes and so on, no. In a very clumsy and simple way, the essence of magic and body, which is like the essence of the father, is literally cut out of the child's body. Survival was really not implied after such a ritual. Chapter 113. There is only one statistic about werewolves, and it is based on assumptions and simple conversations with werewolves. The vast majority of werewolves were former wizards. A few were muggles, but most likely, they were squibs since the ordinary person dies consistently and with exactly the same symptoms. The information provoked a series of logical and not so logical assumptions. It is quite possible that werewolves, hidden chimeras that were created using a similar methodology. Absolutely all chimeras are used in potions as ingredients, and so are werewolves. For some types of chimeras, it is necessary to calculate the area of application of certain spare parts for each individual separately, but this is rare. There is a condition for the manifestation of a chimera, a full moon. There is even a mental matrix of behavior, hunting people. Only people. The werewolves are not particularly interested in ordinary animals, even as food, unless it's absolutely unbearable. If my conclusions are correct, lycanthropy is most likely transmitted like a virus but with strictly defined conditions. Again, if we assume that Madame Rowling is right and that the ability to do magic lies in the genes, which is what the facts about various rituals and curses incline my thoughts to, then the magical essence in the old folio, wizard's genes. Exactly how many are there is unknown. Magical essence, genes of wizardry. Chimera essence, the genetic basis of a chimera. This would also explain the difference between werewolves in appearance and strength. The chimera genes only turn into a werewolf, but what kind is already determined by the genes of the infected. The cause of human mortality can be explained by an important point indicated in the folio. The essence of the chimera is built around the magical essence of the animal, and when the moment arrives, it is through the magic of the animal that the chimera reveals itself to the world. If lycanthropy is a virus that works around the wizard's genes, rearranging something of its own, then in the body of an ordinary person, the virus simply cannot find the necessary genes, but the life cycle forces it to search, and it simply grinds all DNA in all cells, leading to death in the end. The exact mechanism is unknown to me, as well as, I think, to the rest of the wizards, but there is a possibility. It's all a big problem. Even against ordinary viruses, there is no cure, only inhibitors of certain proteins or chemical functions, which ends up somewhat suppressing the activity of the viruses. There's not much to say about magical viruses. Perhaps the offspring from 2 werewolves would not be susceptible to lycanthropy by infection. Oh yes, pure-blooded werewolves don't exist, it's not hereditary. That's kind of weird, considering the DNA change. In theory. However, perhaps the presence of a virus in the body plays an important role. For example, by altering the DNA of the host, a link to the virus is established, and when the conditions are triggered, the chimera template is taken from the virus. This would explain the fact that a werewolf is only contagious in the active phase. Although there is a rumor that if you are bitten by a human werewolf, you may, for example, periodically feel a craving for raw meat, but this has not been verified. In general, although I had a theory, it did not make me feel any better. In addition to the fact that it has not been tested, and regardless of its truthfulness or falsity, I still cannot think of a treatment method. But, during such an assault on the forbidden section, as I have already noticed, I came across a small amount of material on necromancy, work with the soul and spirits. Pretty general stuff, no rituals or anything, but interesting. Some fundamental work in this field, by a priestess, and by the date and signature, even before the time when the wizard went into hiding on his island. Applying, as he himself wrote, some studies of my colleague Herpius, Echristus understood how the soul, body, and mind of a living being are connected. If we put aside various rantings, we get the following. The wizard introduced the definition triad of being as the union of soul, body, and mind. Each aspect of the triad influences the other two, and together they define human existence in the way we are used to and understand it. For example, the simplest connection is the soul and the mind in an embryo. The body determines the development of the mind, but the receptacle of the mind, soul. Damage to the body can negatively affect the mind, but by restoring the body, one restores the mind as if to re-establish the connection. Damage to the soul will negatively affect the mind, but even having restored the soul, the mind will not return without help and therapy. Experience and ability. Since the soul is a reflection of one's life, along with the mind, various skills and abilities are reflected in the soul. Echristus experimented with the souls of various unfortunates and discovered several important aspects. With the help of a couple of tamed dementors, the wizard removed the soul from one body, and through a ritual, unspecified, of course, infused it into another. Simply put, he swapped 2 people's souls. The result was that people had to learn everyday skills, professions, etc. anew, as well as everything the body knew. This also applied to certain talents. For example, one had perfect hearing, but in the end, failed to appear in both. But the experience of replacing the soul of a wizard and a muggle was more interesting. Chapter 114. The wizard's soul in an ordinary human body was capable of minimal magical manipulation. Still, it literally drained the body, and in a couple of days, it couldn't stand it and died with severe physical exhaustion and even getting old. Curious. At the same time, a normal person in a wizard's body exhibited the magical activity of an infant. Despite the adult mind, the person was almost incapable of witchcraft, and the slightest emotional outburst led to accidental wandless magic. In addition to experimenting with soul swapping, Echristus, through unspecified rituals and methods, performed the resurrection of the murdered. Perhaps he used Horcruxes because he used Herpo the Fowl's work, or perhaps he used Dementors, planting the souls they ripped out in temporary vaults through rituals. Not the point. Resurrection with the creation of a new body, rather than transplantation, possession, and other transplantations. Let the full potential of the knowledge and skills reflected in the soul be restored as quickly and as fully as possible. Echristus tested 6 methods of recreating a new body around the soul, and they all gave equally good results. It was these studies that interested me the most. Why oh, it's quite simple. I perfectly remember the moment when I appeared in front of the old man and how this old man handed over to me someone's blood. It seems to me that he tied it to my soul. Perhaps this is the reason why manipulation with blood exhausts me more than with magic. I'm hungry after a passive enhancement with hemomancy, but after magical training, I'm no more hungry than usual. The active blood manipulation empties my stomach at an enormous rate, but I'm used to it. I don't focus on it, but before Hogwarts, it was very tangible. What does this imply? My abilities are not reflected in my body, have no physical embodiment. For the same reason, I've taken over from the basilisk only the ability to talk to snakes, but that's a mental ability, so it relates to the mind, which is projected into reality through the body anyway, except, I guess, for brain injuries. Yes, the spirit sword has unknowable abilities being part of my soul, but I need to project it into reality in order to apply those abilities. All of my special abilities belong to the soul and are indirectly related to reality. But then the question is, why didn't I die of exhaustion during the various experiments, like the test subjects of Acristus? The answer is obvious, it's magic, Max. What else could it be? Maybe that's why I didn't have accidental wandless magic as a child for a long time, but at the same time, I am not the weakest wizard. I dare to hope. I have one idea in my exuberant head, though I don't know how to make it a reality, to remelt myself. The only thing that really inspires concern is the absorbed soul of the basilisk. How exactly is it absorbed? I mean, is it mingled there, dissolved, or whatever, or is it like plasticine, a piece stuck to the side, and that's it? I had no doubts about the possibility of such a remelting because the bone, flesh, and blood ritual in the canon can be considered a similar procedure, which is the recreation of a body for a particular soul, with very little dependence of the result on the source materials. Ancient dark magic, ooh. There it is, in the forbidden section. All in all, a lot of unknowns and no information about experiments with an unusual soul. Experiments. It seems to me that there is simply no time for them. What if the first full moon irreversibly changes the soul, which means I need to develop my own ritual or spell? But the problem is that I am well aware of my mental capabilities and don't consider myself a genius, which means I won't have time to develop a complex ritual, potion, or spell. If it were easy to develop a new potion, there would be plenty of masters in this field, but random experiments in the style of twins disgust me because it is not about swollen tongues and changes in the color of my hair but about my soul. The spell can be created, and the methods of making it are taught in the senior class, runes and arithmancy to help. But then again, if it were that easy, even if it were possible, I'm sure the output would be such complex construction. The number of wand swishes, words, and mental constructions would be so many that either the spell would be impossible to do or impossible to keep everything in my head. Or both. That leaves the ritual. What is ritual? Images of all sorts of demonic stuff instilled by fairy tales and movies, crazy chants in incomprehensible languages, pentagrams, naked dancing, and other stuff pop up in my head. To some extent, it is, but not quite. In essence, a ritual is a spell made up with the help of material objects. At the expense of various geometric shapes, runes, magically active substances, and of course, the wizard recreates a magical construct, whose complexity as a whole, and in the order of action, the activation of certain elements at different stages is too great to fit in the human mind and be recreated on the bare will, imagination, gestures, and words. What is more difficult to create? A spell, a potion, or a ritual? All are equally difficult, but ritual is much easier to implement. But again, I ran into a shortage of brains. I need more brain processing power to master runes, arithmancy, and other things on a deeper level and do a lot of calculations. I need more brains. Brains? And then I had an idea that I had to try out anyway. How long before the students arrive? 2 days. Wonderful. I quickly folded up all my writing activities, pens, and notebooks, in which I wrote down my thoughts in short summaries to make it easier to structure them, through the belt of the bag I always carry on my shoulder, and quickly left the library. Dinner time was coming up, but I will not be in the Great Hall tonight, which meant I needed to visit the kitchen first. Chapter 115. Under the happy glances of the house elves, I ate my fill and hurried to the 8th floor of the castle to the portrait of Barnabas the Barmy. The path was long because the castle is large. In general, relatively soon, I found myself in a corridor where, except for a picture with trolls in ballet tutus and wizard, there was not a single magical canvas. Concentrating on the thought, I need to hide something right away, and imagining a huge hoard of things, I walked around the painting 3 times. As I expected, it worked at the first attempt, and in the stone wall opposite, there was a 2-leaf arched door with a lot of iron monograms. When I pushed one of the flaps and looked inside, I could hardly contain my amazed and delighted whistle. The vast room stood in half-darkness. A soft and almost imperceptible light, so similar in shade to that of the moon, poured from somewhere in the very high ceiling. From almost the entrance and as far as I could see, there were mountains of junk of all kinds. Looks like, I grinned to myself, this might take a while. Although, stepping inside and closing the door behind me, I took my wand out of the holster on my forearm and raised it above me, pointing it upward. Echo. From the tip of the wand, a quick and tiny but relentless wave of magic spread out, immediately returning from various corners of the room of requirement, bringing with it an understanding of the approximate location of at least a few magical items. There weren't many of them in relation to the total amount of junk, about 200. Another 1500 responses were extremely weak, exhausted enchantments. Holy! A smile came out on my face. Malfoy is an asshole, of course, but I probably won't stop thanking him for a visit to France for the rest of my life. It's time to look for. I decided to conduct my search for the Ravenclaw diadem in strict order, moving around the room from the entrance to the depths and inspecting the places where the magical responses came from. Legends have it that this diadem is the pinnacle of the art of enchantment and artifacting in one object, so to speak. There was no such task or arithmetic equation that Rowena could not solve in a brief moment using this artifact. The concentration of attention, improvement of the thought process, and its optimization, this is what is attributed to this diadem, and Rowena herself spoke about such things, albeit in more vague words. Regarding this diadem, I have as many as 3 options for the development of events. Bad, my spirit sword would kill Voldemort's Horcrux along with the artifact. Normal, only the Horcrux dies, and the diadem survives, retaining its functionality. Perfect, the artifact's essence and its functions will be absorbed by the sword, and part of Voldemort's soul will fly into the other world. Or will be destroyed. There is, however, some possibility that part of Voldemort's soul will be absorbed, but there's nothing I can do about that. But if that were to happen, well, the search went quickly. You just go to a magical response, and you don't have to rummage through absolutely every pile of junk, furniture, some incomprehensible structures, mountains of rags, notes, and books that are not unique at all. By the way, I didn't pick up any of the items I found. It takes experience in diagnostics because dark spells, true dark spells, curses, and the like are not much different from simple enchantments in terms of magic. Even the same riddles journal felt just like a book. You really need experience, and you can't get very far with just knowledge. So, I was just checking to see if the diadem was in front of me or not. After 2.5 hours of searching, I finally stumbled upon the object I was looking for, though I didn't recognize it. It was a massive hoop of gold and silver, with lots of topaz and a massive ruby in the center. It looked like a crown. That it was a Horcrux I knew by the slight mental impact. An indecipherable hissing whisper appeared in my head, which I easily cut off with a slight mental effort. But why is this diadem so different from the one shown in the movie HMM? Although, no wonder, in those distant times, there was such a fashion. After walking in circles above the diadem, I sat down beside it and wondered how to eat it without choking. What was the result of past uses of the sword? Stabbed a living basilisk, absorbed its soul, took one mental ability. In France, during a ritual, my consciousness fell into the grimoire at the mercy of some demon. Having defeated the demon with my sword, I almost absorbed it, but the old man took away the illegal, as he himself put it. However, I was still inside the grimoire, and by destroying the bricks of the walls of that mental dungeon, I absorbed the knowledge from it as well. I didn't get anything from the demon, by the way, if I understood correctly. Or maybe I did manage to get something, who knows.
That is all for today. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this journey, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. If you have any suggestions or feedback for me, please drop a comment down below.